Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Ms. Deepal.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us at Vibes of India for this important show. First of all, I would want to introduce our esteemed guest for the day, Mr. B.V. Kumar, who is with us, and he's the most authoritative voice on drug smuggling in India. Mr. Kumar joined the services, the Indian Revenue Services, in 1958 and has a vast experience of over 35 years and has served in several key positions, which include the DG of Revenue Intelligence, that is, that he has headed the DRI, he has headed the Narcotics Control Bureau of India. He has been the DG of Economic Intelligence Bureau and many more esteemed positions in his very well acclaimed 35 years of active service. And if I can recall correctly, the Illustrated Weekly of India once had a cover on him, calling him the super sleuth of India. So I'm very much privileged to have Mr. B.V. Kumar with us. And one more side information I would want to give is that if you have yet not read it, everyone should read a wonderful book called DRI and the Dons, The Untold Stories, penned by Mr. B.V. Kumar. Welcome to my show, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me to your show, The Vibes.
Right. So ours is a multilingual website called The Vibes of India, which is in English, Gujarati, and Hindi. We will be having the conversation in English, sir, with you. And we are going to discuss the current heroin haul in Gujarat, which is making national and international headlines because it is the largest ever quantity of drugs ever seized in India, sir. I would like your valuable comments on this.
Yeah, the most important point that we should keep in mind, and particularly your viewers should know, is after the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan on 1st of September, this is the first major haul that has happened. That on the two containers were detained by the DRA on the 13th of September in Mundra port. And subsequently by 17th, they were able to unearth under the bags of talc stones, which is ultimately meant to be used in the manufacture of talcum powder. And beneath the big sacks, jumbo bags, they found out that heroin of a quantity of nearly 2,888 kilograms were found. It's a massive quantity, and it's a world record in terms of both quantity and value. But more importantly, why did they choose Mundra port? That is a question that probably many of your audience may be wanting to know. See, we have heightened vigilance on the Indo-Pakistan border because of the terrorist activity and infiltration by the terrorists into our country for carrying out sabotage operations, which is well recorded. We had various types of army establishments which are attacked, Air Force establishments which are attacked. And so we have very heightened vigilance on the border. Further, the border has been fenced and patrolled continuously by the Border Security Force. Now, that being so, the smuggling syndicate, particularly the international syndicates, have found the sea routes, particularly through the Seer Creek and the Gulf of Kambat and the Gulf of Porbandar. They found it's easier to penetrate. So that is what I think is probably the motive. But what is important is even preceding this particular seizure of 3,000 kilograms on 17th of September, we had a major seizure in March 2021 from a Sri Lankan vessel, which was apprehended by the Indian Coast Guard with 301 kilograms of heroin. And it also had AK-47 rifles, 5 of them, and 1,000 rounds of live ammunition. This was early, again, before that, in November 2020, Indian Coast Guard apprehended another vessel, again Sri Lankan vessel, with about 150 kilograms of heroin. So a series, this type of continuous smuggling of heroin of late is an eye-opener both for the customs organization as well as the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. So it needs a coordinated and well thought out plan to prevent this type of smuggling operations. So, and why they chose Mundra port is another question anybody would ask, because they have declared it as a legitimate cargo for which the proper documents are filed. And they used a couple by name Sudhakar and his wife Durga Dipali, who are based in Chennai. They used a facilitator called OECL Logistics, and one Varman, he is the person who is heading it, and he facilitated them to get the import-export code. They also used a customs agent based in Ahmedabad, one Mr. Amit. I think probably the Gujarati channels must have put out his name, and he facilitated in filing of the customs papers and other things. Now, the intelligence that comes out so also through the official sources is that probably this couple who have lent their name might have been probably innocent, may not be knowing what exactly for which they have signed the bills of entry or filed the import documents, and for which probably they might have received a paltry sum of 50,000 rupees or something like that, and some amount for clearing the cargo and other things, least realizing that why they had signed it. But the other thing that we have to keep in mind is their office is located in Vijayawada, in the house of the mother of Vaishali. Whereas these people live in Chennai. The IEC was obtained through a facilitator, this OECL Logistics, by using his offices. And then customs agent is appointed in Ahmedabad. And if it was really meant for them and for their trading company called Ashi Trading Company, the nearest port for them is Visakhapatnam. They should have directed that the cargo should come to Visakhapatnam. Why should they get it in Mundra? And from there, imagine the logistic that is required to bring all the way to Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu for marketing, if it is a legitimate cargo. The other aspect that we have to keep in mind is, why did it come via Bandar Abbas? The cargo definitely originated in the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, then taken to Bandar Abbas, which is an Iranian port, and there it was in transit. When a cargo is in transit, normally the customs authorities do not check by opening and examining unless there is specific intelligence, probably there was misdeclaration of the cargo. So that is basically to camouflage the origin of the drug. The moment if it comes from Pakistan or Afghanistan directly, then probably it would have been checked either on the high sea or when it came to the port and other things. So this is how the modus operandi has been followed. So and now the couple are in jail in Bhuj for 14 days custody, unfortunately or fortunately. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Very nicely explained, So it goes, the route is Afghanistan to Pakistan to Iran to Gujarat. And maybe it was from Gujarat, it was supposed to go to Vijayawada. But do you think that it was meant only for Vijayawada or Delhi or for some international destination as well?
No, here probably you should know the background also. It's not the first consignment which came to Mundra. Earlier, there was a consignment in June of this year, 2021, where 25 tons of heroin was brought and landed at Mundra port, which was transported by a Rajasthan-based truck. The truck number is also available. It is RJ, that is Rajasthan registration, 01GB8328. And it belongs to one Jaideep Logistics. Now, this particular truck has been engaged for transporting from Mundra to God knows to which destination and other things. Now, inquiries made by the investigating agency, particularly the DRA, showed that this truck has not passed through any toll gates. either towards Delhi or towards Bombay. So that means my presumption and my own analysis of the information that's available shows that probably the drug is still in Gujarat, concealed in one safe location. There are a number of locations in Gujarat where these drugs can be concealed. And I remember when the last major seizure, when I was in charge, was at the Gujarat-Maharashtra border in a farmhouse, in a farm, open farm, where under a haystack, 703 kilograms of heroin was found, and it belonged to the Dawood gang. And Iqbal Mirchi was involved in that case. And in addition, there was 4 tons of hashish in original packings and another 4 to 5 tons of Mandrax tablets. At that point of time, that was the largest seizure in the world. But now, compared to that, 3,000 kilograms is a massive world record seizure. Now, again, this is valued at about 20,000 crores in the international market. Imagine what would be the value of the 25 tons, that is 25,000 kilograms of heroin, which has already passed through and which was not yet detected. So I don't think it's meant for the Indian market. Neither the people have that type of financial muscle, either to finance its import or for consumption. India consumes about 6% of the world drug production. We are a major, we were only a transit country till a few years back, but now we're slowly emerging as a major consuming country. The price of heroin at Delhi, which used to be about 30 to 40,000 per kilogram, is now 4 crores per kilogram. So imagine even the amount of money a drug trafficker can make by smuggling it to Delhi or to Bombay. But if it's meant for Bombay, generally it is meant for international export, either to the American market or for the European market. That's how the picture emerges.
Yes, sir. So as you rightly pointed out, that it could be for the international market. So then isn't there an additional risk involved that it is, it lands at Gujarat and then goes to Vijayawada and then goes to Mumbai or Delhi? Does not that surmount to additional risk for the so-called cartel that is dealing into these drugs or the crime syndicate?
I don't think it was ever meant for going to Vijayawada. It was never meant for going to Vijayawada. Okay. From Mundra, probably because the highway is via Rajasthan, and either for Delhi or for Bombay, it was meant either for, a part of it at least, meant for international smuggling. And a part is probably for terrorist funding. Now, intrinsically, drug smuggling and terrorist financing are intrinsically linked. So the funds that is generated in sale proceeds of drugs are used for financing of terrorist activity, because you need a tremendous amount of finance to support the terrorist activity, both for purchase of arms, ammunition, and people who are ready to sacrifice for their life, because they may ultimately be killed, to sacrifice their life in carrying out the subversive activities. Further, it's also used for financing the sleeper cells, which they have set up in India, particularly with the assistance of Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency.
So, sir, you with your vast experience, do you think that, instead of just being a transshipment route, Pakistan could be playing a major role into this?
Certainly, because right now Afghanistan is in a total economic collapse. They don't have any money, and the money which belonged to Afghanistan government was deposited in the US Federal Reserve, and that has been frozen by the US government. Then the money that was with the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Bank, they have frozen the funds. IMF is not extending any help. So they're really in a tight bind in terms of financial support. Now, China is entering into the picture. They said they will support Afghanistan financially to start with. Now, Pakistan is playing a major role, because earlier India was helping Afghanistan in their development activities. The presidential palace was built by India. The highways, then a lot of infrastructure facilities were built by India. And India was doing a very, then they were building and helping in building of schools and universities and colleges and other thing. A lot of development work was done by India. They were not in the business of fighting the Taliban or anything like that. So now that was a sort of an eyesore for Pakistan. Pakistan felt that India is having a major influence in Afghanistan. Now they have entered the picture. Now, financially, they cannot support Afghanistan because Pakistan itself is in dire straits as far as its economy is concerned. They have a lot of problems. And so what they are doing is advising Afghanistan as to how to subvert and carry out subversive activities in India. And they are probably introducing China to Afghanistan to help them to come out of these problems. In the short run, at least, till international community slowly opens up.
Sir, in your vast experience while heading DRI or the Narcotics Control Bureau of India, what has been your observation that when it comes to international smuggling, where do you think which countries could have been the destinations for this haul or the previous hauls, that you may have had encountered during your service?
Mostly the United States, because at that point of time, the value in Afghanistan was about 30,000 rupees per kilogram. By the time it used to reach Bombay, it was a lakh of rupees. Now those figures are absolutely outdated. And when a kilogram of heroin reaches United States, at the street level, it becomes $1 million per kilogram. And that too a diluted one. Okay. And whereas if it is smuggled to Europe, the value used to be double. So Europe is a very favorite destination as compared to the USA. But then USA has a confirmed market. There's a certain amount of liberalization in some of the Scandinavian countries as far as hashish is concerned, not so much for heroin. Okay. So, and they also prefer cocaine because cocaine comes into large quantities come to Barcelona and then to Europe, whereas our hashish and heroin goes to Amsterdam because Amsterdam is one of the largest ports, and through container traffic, it goes there. And if it is not detected, it slowly enters the European market, and where they get much higher amount than what they get in the American market. So both are favorite destinations as far as.
Okay.
Yeah, both are favorite destinations.
Right. So India could have just been a transit point to maybe smuggle this to international markets who could afford this. Right, sir?
Yeah, at that point of time, and even today also, to a large extent, because we don't have that type of capacity to absorb such huge quantities of drugs. Still, as I mentioned earlier, 6% of the world production of drugs is consumed in India. And the victim state is one, Punjab is there. Maharashtra in Bombay particularly. Of course, there's a shift from heroin to party drugs like methamphetamine and other things. That is one of the development. Bangalore is another place where a lot of rave parties held. Pune is another destination where rave parties are held, but not necessarily heroin, but the later synthetic drugs being abused. So India has now slowly emerging into a consuming country for which we have to guard ourselves because the next generation will be very badly affected, and parents cannot see the torture, the children being affected by this type of problem.
Very good point made by you, sir. I have 2-3 more questions to go by.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, my question is that, there is a lot of politics played right now because it is Gujarat. I feel that the drug menace is an issue that everyone should unequivocally focus on, and without it's just inarguable that we focus on Gujarat. This could have been caught from, say, Visakhapatnam. It could have been caught from Mumbai, Kolkata, anywhere, right, sir?
Correct.
So, first of all, I would like to applaud the DRI and the customs who got such wonderful intelligence because it was no way possible. So, I would like you to tell me something about how the DRI and the customs operate and what untoward situations do they face in such major operations.
So basically, DRI operates based upon a network of informers. They also operate with the essence of technological tools. And over a period of time, they develop the intelligence. It's not as if the very first consignment of drugs are seized. And it could be a test consignment of a small quantity, which they may allow to find out who are the real kingpins behind the whole smuggling racket. And they may pass on that type of intelligence to the field organizations, the customs and others, to make the seizure after it reaches the destination point within the Gujarat, any of the towns. That is how they do it. But then they would have by that time identified who are the real people behind the whole operation. So that is one method of doing it. The other method is by profiling an organization. For example, take this particular case. Here is a company called Ashish Trading Company, headquartered or registered in Vijayawada. The persons in charge, the husband and wife, they stay in Chennai. They obtain the facilitation of the import-export code at Chennai. The customs agent is in Ahmedabad, probably has a branch in Mundra, and it lands at Mundra port, and that to a private port. Why they could have brought it to Vijayawada or Chennai, which would have been a much easier thing for them in terms of clearing the documents, clearing the consignment and other things, if it was a legitimate cargo. So the very fact that the whole thing has been done like this itself is an eye-opener. So immediately, if a bit of profiling is done of an organization, they'll be able to find out whether the legitimate importers and exporters, or that's only a company floated for the purpose of organized smuggling. I mean, that is another method, but they heavily rely on information obtained through technological sources. They also rely on the national, National Technical Research Organization, NTRO, who also support them in terms of intelligence. And for field operations, particularly in the sea, they also take the assistance of the Coast Guard for interception of the ship. The other difficult thing which they face in real field activity is, if it was gold, it is low volume and high value, and you don't need containers for that. So they usually are brought by the Arab doors or I know from personal knowledge in the Kutch and Jamnagar area, even the children know how to operate a sextant, and they're all trained. In 5 days, they go to Dubai and come back. And they can easily be apprehended on the high sea. It's not difficult. And our own seized Arab doves have been retrofitted and deployed to intercept that type of things. But then our customs fleet, which are fast boats, they cannot operate in a high sea, particularly if the sea is rough. They can operate beautifully in coastal waters. So they have to take the sense of the Coast Guard. But then here it is very different. Here it is coming in commercial quantities, and they have come in containers. That's where the difficulty comes in. Once it's in a container, you can't find out by simply examining a container. Particularly if normal examination is done, the container is opened, a particular percentage of checks are done. In the front, when you open, probably all the legitimate cargo will be there, unless you have specific intelligence and things like that. So they have to depend upon either information provided by the informers within the organization, and then who risk their lives because they are probably killed in case they come to know that a particular person has given the information. But they also rely upon technological tools to get the correct information.
Yes, sir. So in this case, I'm looking at a statement made by the port operator, which are Adani's, and I'm looking at a couple of statements made by various political parties. So I would want a clarity on the fact that if Adani is the port operator, under the Indian rules, can the operator, who is considered to be the custodian of the container, does
Cargo,
he or she have a right to open the container?
No. They are purely custodians and trustees of the cargo that comes in, and they have to maintain the records of the arrival and other things. The import manifest has to be filed with the customs authorities, and then the goods are taken into the warehouses of the port trust. But the port trust has no authority to open and examine the consignments. It's only the customs authorities who can do that. And to that extent, you cannot hold the Adani port or the Mundra port is responsible if any contraband comes inside the particular port. But they get custody of the cargo if it is abandoned and for more than a year or two it is not cleared. Then they open, examine, and then they have the right to auction. So they will auction, and then a part of the duty element, if it is involved, that's paid to the customs. The rest of the proceeds are taken over by the port trust. So they can do only at the last point when the consignment is not cleared and abandoned. Then the port trust comes into the picture, not before that.
Sir, you made a very important point that the Adanis or who are the port operators cannot be considered responsible in any manner for this. Can you elaborate a little more on that, please?
That is the normal rule under the Indian Ports Act. They're just custodians. Even if it's a Bombay Port Trust, they're only custodians. They're not open and examine and other things. So same is true even if it's and same is true if it's an internal container depot, where in some cases it's manned by the customs authorities. In some cases, even private operators have been given the license to have private bonded warehouse license. For example, in Chennai, there are private operators who manage the internal container depots. They maintain the records, they keep the cargo in custody, and the customs authorities are present there for purposes of clearance and other things. So also, for example, in Bangalore, the Menzies Boba Aviation Private Limited, it's a private company, but they operate the entire cargo warehouse. But they are only custodians. So beyond that, you can't hold them responsible. If something is lost there, then they are held responsible in their custody. Yeah.
Okay. So that's very interesting. I don't know whether you have been able to go through the press the press note that Adanis have released, which says that they are not responsible. So you think they are factually correct, or has been there any effort to conceal any information, or this is the usual norm?
No, they are legally correct.
Okay.
As per the procedures, they are legally correct.
So,
but if they have connived or anything, there's no information to that effect, either in public domain or probably with any other agency yet.
Right. So, sir, in this case, if the DRI or if the customs want to enter the exact place where the containers are kept, can a private port operator not deny them entry? In this case, can Adani stop anyone?
No, they cannot. They cannot. Customs have every right. The DRI has every right under the Customs Act to seize any container. And so long as they have reasonable belief that it contains contraband, any type of contraband. It could be gold, it can be drugs, it can be any other cargo, which is not declared and which is not according to the manifest. So no port trust authority can deny that.
So you just told me about how Chennai or Visakhapatnam, there could be private cargo operators as well. So this seizure, instead of say the port at Mundra, which is owned by Adani, it could happen anywhere, right?
You're right. It can happen anywhere. It has happened at Nhava Sheva. Nhava Sheva is a government port and one of the largest container ports in India. And with assistance of the Dutch government, the minister in charge of the Dutch government, and Rajesh Pilot, who at that point of time was the Minister for Transport. And Rajiv Gandhi himself came and opened that port. I was present at that time as member customs. So that's one of the largest container depots, container ports within the country. So it's a government operated, so they are only the custodians. It's the customs authorities who have the right to seize any consignment, even if it is There was a seizure of heroin in Nhava Sheva port. It was the DRI who made the seizure, and Nhava Sheva port authorities never interfered.
So,
So they
sir,
have no authority to stop it.
so yeah, sir, what I gather is that, these cargoes can come to any port, whether it's a private port or a government port. And we have enough, like in your vast experience, is it just the Navsheva port, or have you seen other government ports which also have found contraband in their cargoes and
Yes.
stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely correct. You're right. For example, in Chennai container depots, red sandals were being smuggled in containers and they were caught just before they were loaded onto ships. So though it was a part of the port trust is a government port, and the internal container depots are privately owned, some of them, not all. And seizures were made by the DRI, containers containing red sandals, which were substitute on way. The estimate cargo of granite stones loaded, and on way to Chennai, the containers were stopped, the seals were broken, the granite was removed, loaded with red sandals, which is a favorite in Malaysia and Japan. And then they were about to smuggle, and the DRI caught them in Chennai port in a private bonded warehouse.
Okay.
So also another case happened in Tuticorin port. There also they seized.
Okay.
So it can happen anywhere, government or private.
So, sir, this is a little personal question, because I see a lot of politicians, especially the opposition, trying to make a narrative that, oh, it is this private port and this private port owned by Mr. Adani, who is in the epicenter of all that is happening. So you think that theory does not hold true, right? It could happen anywhere.
It can happen anywhere. So at this point of time, it can be a political narrative, but not based entirely on facts. So unless the facts emerge, nobody can be blamed.
And
That's how it should be.
Sir, do you think such fake narratives could really distract us in pursuing what actually is the truth?
I think it's purely for public consumption. I don't think DRI will be swayed by that. DRI will carry out the investigation logically to its ultimate conclusion. They'll go by the leads. The best lead they have is at Chennai, the person who got the importer-export code, and the customs agent who facilitated filing of the document. The Rajasthan truck owners, that is Jaideep Logistics. A lot of leads are there. So at least they can find out who are the persons who have engaged them. So one level up they can go. And these persons will not know beyond that. But once you know the person above who has engaged them, the chap will break down in interrogation. He will certainly tell who is the next higher up who engaged them. So that's how the investigation goes. But one needs a lot of patience, and it takes time consuming, but a lot of perseverance the DRI has, and I'm sure they'll be able to find out the real culprits sooner or later. That is one part. The second part is that within the organization, the international syndicate, which was responsible for smuggling this large quantity of heroin, they will also be trying to find out whether any in their own chain of command has probably let them down. So they will also be trying to identify who is the person who is responsible, and they will try to eliminate them. And that fellow will get the shiver of life, and probably he may come running to the DRI to give the information.
Okay.
So that may also happen.
So this sounds like a very Hollywoodish and a very Mexican drug serial like Narcos, or the the Queen of the South sort of a series. So, sir, if someone in the syndicate breaks down, could they turn into government witness in India? Is that possible?
Possibility is there. In some cases, it has happened. In some cases, happened, but they run the risk of being killed. And particularly in drug cases, in gold cases, it has happened, where Iqbal Mirchi has killed one of the Keralites who was the landing agent who became the informer. They found out, and ultimately, mercilessly, they killed him. And that is not normally done in gold smuggling, because they consider it as a business. And whereas in the case of drugs, they're ruthless. They're ruthless, and they say either lead or silver. That is their rule. Lead is a bullet, and silver is a bribe. So you choose that. So that's how it is. So a number of law enforcement officers have been killed, both in USA and also in Mexico. So it may happen in India also. If any of the down the chain, if somebody lets them down, they will eliminate them.
That's a very enlightening piece of information. And sir, before I end, I would like to quote, I read you only somewhere where you said that DRI is a very efficient force doing a lot of visible action by staying invisible. So I think
you're right.
DRI and customs, I'm just quoting you. I read this in your book.
Thank you.
So
It's an elite organization. It's an elite organization manned by lesser manpower, but with a highly motivated, highly trained in terms of investigation. But this type of drug trafficking can be stopped only when financial investigation is also done, because the amount of finance that's involved is very high. Whether it can go for terrorist financing, sorry. So it can go for terrorist financing. It can go for any other purpose, certain political purposes also sometimes, because the money is required for elections are very expensive affair nowadays. So some people may misuse it. So that possibility is there. So keeping all these things in mind, one has to investigate objectively, seriously, from a point of view of neutralizing the syndicate. That's more important than get diverted in the political narratives.
Thank you very much for this session, sir. And I would want to recap the last point, that instead of getting carried away by political narratives, it is very important to identify the crime syndicate and the drug cartels involved in this, which I'm sure you would agree with me, could have very much of foreign connections, because this amount does not seem to be viable or feasible in the Indian context. Am I right, sir?
You're very correct. You're very correct. But what is important for us is also to see the role of Pakistan, whether they are now using Afghanistan as a sort of a tool. Earlier also they were very, the ISA was very, very much in the picture in destabilizing India. And there the ISI, the military establishment, are very closely interlinked with the drug smugglers of Pakistan, and where the industry is of an order of 100 billion rupees, that's almost 10,000 crores, out of which $1 billion worth is smuggled to India itself. So they have an ulterior motive to destabilize India, and probably now they may use the Afghanistan as a tool. You smuggle out, then you generate money and you run your government, and we will assist you. I mean, some sort of a technical know-how they may be giving to Afghanistan, which probably we have to reckon with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. B.V. Kumar, for this insightful, meaningful conversation that we've had on the world's largest seizure of heroin at Mundra in Kutch, Gujarat. The Indian seizure now amounts to be the world's largest seizure ever in the history of heroin smuggling or any other smuggling. And during our conversation with Mr. B.V. Kumar, we also came to this conclusion that no individual port, whether it's government owned or privately owned, in this case it's the Mundra port, which is owned by Mr. Gautam Adani, but as Mr. B.V. Kumar and at least 4 other customs and DRI officers we spoke to very emphatically told us that no port owner or no port can be deemed responsible, because they are only the custodians of that particular port. They do not even have the right to touch the container. For more such interesting conversations and videos, do keep watching vibesofindia.com. Thank you.